honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host this morning. I'm going to cover a couple of areas that I find worthy of mention. More than worthy of mention. Worthy of outrage. They've finally done it. Government propaganda is now legal for use against American citizens here in the domestic United States. I've been warning about this for years, that the House and the Senate have been attempting to change the law that would allow the government to inject government propaganda directly into the American mainstream dialogue. And now it has become a reality. They have changed the Smith-Mundt bill by now recalling it the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act of 2012. It passed as part of the infamous 2013 National Defense Authorization Act. Another complete and total abuse of the NDAA. And it allows domestic propaganda for consumption here in the domestic United States. This, ladies and gentlemen, heralds the true motives of this government. Manipulation of the populace to create non-thinking sheeple who are content to accept whatever action this tyrannical government may deliver to them. The goal of this is clear. It is intentionally designed to disseminate misinformation, disinformation, and government propaganda. Goebbels would be proud. Stalin would be proud. Pol Pot, Mao would be proud. I am disgusted, and you should be too. They're couching this under the argument that Voice of America can now be broadcast domestically to embedded expat communities. That's a lie. A flat-out, bold-faced lie. It would bar the Smith-Mundt Act, or neutralize the Smith-Mundt Act of 48 and the Foreign Relations Authorization Act of 87. There are plenty of ways that America as a nation can be kept safe without turning to a massive disinformation campaign utilizing PSYOPs tactics by the federal government, the Pentagon, the military, and the ideologues in Washington. I have to tell you, this is one of the most important abuses that you will see in the latter second half of this presidency. Why, you ask? Because it's a simple thing. How can it possibly overshadow Obamacare? How can it possibly overshadow the DHS? How can it possibly overshadow the NSA? How can it possibly overshadow the IRS scandals? I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you how. This law allows the federal government to have sweeping power to push television, radio, newspaper, and social media propaganda onto the U.S. public. It removes protection for Americans from the ideological diarrhea that will pour forth from this administration like ejected vomit. You see, America has been protected from this for good reason. The types of information that we promulgate overseas to foreigners is disinformation. It is meant to confuse, distract, redirect. It is not meant to be an informative source of news. Now, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. There is already, for all intents and purposes, an organization in the United States that does this. It's called MSNBC, NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, Fox News. They are an arm of propaganda. But if you think things were bad before with those groups, wait until you see what's going to come out of them now. They'll be reporting government misinformation as factual news stories. And a gullible American public will swallow it hook, line, and sinker. This is an attempt to sway public opinion by the misuse and abuse of information. It serves no purpose other than for this administration to use this type of disinformation to sway American public opinion to accept things like gun control, the new TTIP I told you about last week and over the weekend, the Trans-Pacific TPP partnership, another NAFTA-CAFTA type trade deal, the European Union and U.S. merger I told you about last week. You see, all of these things are designed to do one thing, and that is fracture and break down the walls of American sovereignty so that we accept globalization and we are willing to accept a small oligarchy of elitists who dictate the rules to us as to what we should do, what we should read, what we should see, what we should think, what we should feel. And this will be a taxpayer-funded abuse of you. I've said it to you many times before, that the idea that you are willing to pay for your own demise through taxpayer-funded boondoggles like this and many others is an unconscionable abuse of the taxing authority. What you don't realize is that the Pentagon already spends well over $4 billion a year to pump this trash globally. But there's been a firewall around the United States of America that has prohibited this type of abuse here domestically. They spent $202 million last year in Iraq and Afghanistan alone. $4 billion globally. Watch that budget jump to 10. I will bet you anything that budget will jump to an astronomical number in no time flat. This is an abuse that cannot be accepted by the American people. this type of indoctrination is exactly what we saw in totalitarian regimes in history. This is the kind of junk that the Nazis used to demonize intellectuals, religious leaders, the Jewish people, the wealthy. This is the same exact abusive tactic that we saw the Soviets use to demonize the bourgeois. You know what bourgeois is? For the record, translated, it means middle class people. Not the elite, not the 1%ers, the middle class. The property owners, the shopkeepers, the small business owners. And if you haven't smelled already the type of putrid diatribe that will usher forth from this particular administration over the course of the next 3 years, all you've got to do is look back and look at how they treated the ultra-wealthy, who on one hand, they're demonizing for greed and avarice, while simultaneously holding out their other hand to accept donations. In fact, holding fundraisers where one dinner cost you $38,000, $35,000, $39,000. And these sophomoric sycophants show up at a dinner like that, pay that kind of money to be told that they're trash. I watched last night Atlas Shrugged Part 2. If you haven't read Atlas Shrugged, I strongly encourage you to do that. In fact, I'm not encouraging you. I'm telling you, get a copy of Atlas Shrugged. Get it from Amazon, buy it on eBay. I don't care where you get it. Read it. And I'm going to tell you why. The scenario outlined in that particular fiction novel was and is prescient. You see, the outline that Ayn Rand portrayed in that book was a government that became a government not of what's right for the people or representing the people. It became a government of pull. And when she uses the term or the phrase pull, what she means is influence. I've got pull as a congressman. I can make things happen. And it shows you how small-minded, tyrannical people will be compromised. Their human nature will be compromised by that 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 ounces of power, and how they become drunk so rapidly on the liquor of power. You will see so many similarities in that book to our scenario right now today that you will be astounded. And it was written in 1957. I'm not encouraging you to read it. I'm telling you, go get it. I get it, it's 1,500 pages. Quit belly aching and read it. Quit complaining and read it. Because it's a roadmap for exactly where we are headed right now today. It's not just a roadmap, it's a roadmap that clearly marks out our destination point, which is the complete and total and utter collapse of the rule of law. It becomes a scenario where the public good is held up as the iconic or the chalice, if you will, that all sacrifice individually and personally can and should be made for the public good. Meanwhile, the only people who are actually getting any good from it are those who are making the rules. And it is so apparent and so evident and so blatant in our economy, in our political dialogue, in our social interaction today, that it is impossible for you to not see and recognize where we are on that map. And I promise you that we are a whole lot closer to the destination than you would care to believe. This bill is treason. Do you know why? There he goes with that word again. Well, when you violate your oath and you work against the best interests of your nation, willfully, knowingly, with malice aforethought, ladies and gentlemen, that qualifies as treason. And I'm telling you now that your government is acting in open, undeclared, but blatant treason. I'm going to read you a couple of the phrases out of this. This is their bill. The Secretary and the Broadcasting Board of Governors are authorized, listen to this one now, read between the lines, to use funds appropriated, or, by the way, appropriated means taken from you, or otherwise made available. That means that 501c4 PAC groups, these NGOs can pump literally tens of billions of dollars into the coffers of these people to create a Goebbels-like, I'm telling you, ministry of propaganda. That's what it means. Funds appropriated or otherwise made available for public diplomacy information programs to provide for the preparation, dissemination, and use of information intended for foreign audiences abroad about the United States, its people, and its policies through press, publications, radio, motion pictures, the internet, and other information media, including social media, and through information centers, instructors, and other direct or indirect means of communication. Folks, that covers the gamut. That covers the gamut. It allows the government to pay for and to have funding delivered not only through congressional appropriation, but also from other sources, otherwise made available. Did you hear the key phrase there? What that does is it doesn't open a door. It doesn't open a window. It opens a wall that will allow NGOs, non-governmental organizations, who have a globalist ideology and a globalist agenda to fund this type of abuse. Now, further on, a little bit later, it states, where's my notes? No funds authorized to be appropriated to the Department of State or the Broadcasting Board of Governors shall be used to influence public opinion in the United States. Well, that sounds okay then. Stop right there, because you didn't get it in its full context. This section shall apply only to programs carried out pursuant to the United States Information and Educational Exchange Act of 1948. The next paragraph starts out with rules of construction. Here's where they utilize verbicide and legalese to completely destroy the intent of the previous paragraph. Nothing in this section shall be construed to prohibit the Department of State or the Broadcasting Board of Governors from engaging in any medium or form of communication, either directly or indirectly, because a United States domestic audience is or may be thereby exposed to program material or based on a presumption of that exposure. Such material may be made available within the United States and disseminated when appropriate, pursuant to sections blah, 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 blah. America, you've just been snookered. And it's going to get worse. They just passed this. So you haven't even begun to see the effects yet. I'm going to tell you what some of the effects are. All this nonsense about the Department of Justice organizing, participating, and assisting in Trayvon Martin reprisal rallies, that's exactly what you're going to get. And you're going to get it by a landslide. You haven't even begun to smell the danger of this one yet, people. And here's the worst part. You'll never know if what you're hearing is true news or propaganda. And so the idea that there can be a news media that can inform the American public is forever gone. You'll never know going forward if this is propaganda or if this is a news story. Is this a government-instituted story designed and directed and created to manipulate your emotion, your feelings, your logic, your reason, your ability to make decisions? Or is it just a news story? You see, if you hadn't had critical thinking skills before, you have no hope now. The low information, vast majority of America, the people who are willing to accept whatever is basically poured into their ears, will be so inundated with disinformation, they will never even be aware that they're being played, that they are being used, that they are pawns for manipulation to achieve government's nefarious ends. And I do mean nefarious. Because only a government who had evil intent would attempt to utilize a tactic like this. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. You can find us on the internet at americasvoicenow.org. You can click on the button. It's about a third of the way down the page on the right. It says Watch Live, and you can capture this show streaming every day live right there. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/America's Voice Now. You can find this and every other radio program that we do on YouTube immediately after this broadcast. And you can find that by going to youtube.com/America's Voice Now. That's our channel address. You can click on that, like it, subscribe to it, watch those programs, share them with your family and friends. America, the end is right around the corner.
Ladies and gentlemen,
This is KBS.